Hey guys, what's up? This is JT and this is the Let's Grow podcast. Thanks so much for tuning back in, or if you're joining for the very first time, we certainly appreciate your time and attention, as this podcast is designed to help you not just go through life, but to grow through life. And every guest that we have an opportunity to hear from, I'm telling you that if you listen intently, you'll certainly be blessed by their story, by some of their challenges that they've overcome, some of their successes, right? Just real people, real situations, just like yourself, that can certainly help you grow. So I'm excited to have my friend join me today, Mr. Andy Megargel. Andy, thanks for hanging out for a few minutes.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Totally, man. Well, it's been an interesting year to say the least. It seems like that's been an opening line for a lot of conversations that we've had this year. And people are tired of talking about the same thing, what's in the news, what's dominating the headlines. You and I had some conversations about this several months ago, but today we're going to talk a little bit about overcoming obstacles and the mindset, right? In a simple framework, a real simple, sticky idea that I think people can remember and take home with them and apply in any situation that they're in. But before we get into that conversation, do me a favor and tell folks a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Okay, so if you've never met me, my name is Andy Megargel, and I'm a father, a husband, a teacher. I've been a coach. I've worn a lot of different hats. I've been a fraternity advisor. There's a lot of different things that I've done. Been an athlete. You name it, I've tried it, right? But currently I'm teaching at Pulaski County High School in Somerset, Kentucky. I teach freshman English 1, and we are trying to figure out what virtual schooling looks like, sounds like, walks like. We're trying to figure it all out. We've attempted to go, our specific school has gone hybrid for a couple months. And so we started out and we were all virtual, and then we went back to school and we tried to figure that out, kind of doing hybrid learning as well as in-person learning, and the challenges that come with all the technology issues and, different situations and circumstances that people have. And so as an educator, those are a lot of the battles and the things that I've been dealing with. Along on top of everything else that I guess everybody with 2020 pandemic, everything else everybody else is feeling about. I can't go out to a restaurant. I have to wear a mask everywhere I go with everything I do, and it's kind of nuts. But we're finding a way. We're persevering, and that's what today's about, right? Overcoming obstacles.
Totally, that's it. Thank you for giving our listeners a little bit of background. And guys, I've known Andy for several years now. We actually met by way of coaching. And when I moved to the Somerset area where I currently live at, and this fine young man, we hit it off really well when it comes to some interest in personal growth and leadership, adding value to others. And that sparked a few conversations. And then what kind of snowballed from there was Andy choosing to partner with me and helping deliver some content to you guys. And so a lot of the stuff that you all see via email, via social media, he has had a personal touch on helping craft some of those ideas, some of those messages, some of those workshops. And so behind the scenes warrior here. And so I'm indebted to Andy for a lot of his service and his partnership. He's a phenomenal husband. He's an incredible dad. He's a passionate educator. And all in all, he's a winner. He's a competitor. He's a kind of guy. That's right. I'm blowing his head up right now. What I admire about Andy, and what I think that you're going to hear from a little bit of his story today and some of the questions that we walk through, is he's a figure out how to make it work kind of guy. All right. And I think there's something special to be said about those types of people. And so while a lot of people have wallowed around in the muck and the mire and the frustration of this year, right, there have been other people who have said, I'm just going to figure out how to make it work, and I'm going to take it one day at a time, and I'm going to do what I can. And so let's talk about that today, Andy. Let's talk a little bit about your framework, your perspective this year, because obviously you mentioned virtual learning, trying to figure out how to do this in public education, learning new skills, dealing with new headaches, right? Every obstacle, though, is an opportunity. I know that's your mindset on this thing. And so let's talk a little bit about what are some challenges that you've grown through this year, and maybe not even just from a professional perspective, but also on a personal note.
Okay. Yeah, and I think you hit. There's a lot of there's a lot of wisdom, and I know you talk to a lot of different people, and you're pulling from a lot of different areas. But there's a lot of wisdom and advice that you just gave in that little intro segue, and just taking it every day, one day at a time, one step at a time. I think not getting too far out in advance in the vision, because the target at this point with the pandemic, they keep changing the rules on us, and they keep changing the target. And that's probably in most professions, as far as job wise and employment. The restrictions, the regulations, all that is changing, and it's very fluid. And so we have to be even more adaptive than normal, which if you're used to that, if you've programmed and you can kind of reprogram your mind to think that way, then that's not a problem. But because as people, we're capable of more than we think we are. We just often don't know that. You know what I mean? So,
Totally.
Take it one day at a time, like you said, and then if your world has kind of like collapsed in a lot of different ways, and maybe it's not extremes, we're not talking necessarily extremes here, but if your plan has not worked out like you thought it would, maybe the step is to get back and start over. Not, because we all had plans prior to 2020 and they changed, right? And so we're having to change and adjust and kind of build back up. And so I think 2021 is just going to be all about rebuilding and repurposing and reprogramming our brain.
So one thing that stood out in there that I heard you say is, talking about starting over. And speak to that for just a second, because I know a lot of people, maybe where they're at in their career or where they're at in their health, right? Where they're at with financially, saving, and now things have changed because this has drastically impacted their income. Speak to that idea a little bit about about it being okay to start over, because I think a lot of people naturally are afraid of that concept.
And yeah, they are. We all are. We all don't like change. We like to make the world the way we want it, get comfortable, and just call it good, right? But that's not how life works. And when we finally get comfortable, that's when things start changing. And that's one of the things I've learned as a parent of toddlers, is that you just always have to be ready for the unexpected and just be ready to go, at any moment. But I think that mentality of perseverance meets, like you said, it's okay to start over, right? And the frustration that comes with having to start over is something that I identify with and I totally get, and I've faced in my own life in different seasons of my life. And maybe we'll talk about it a little bit, maybe we won't, I don't know. But I get it. If you are in 2020, the world is asking you to change from what you've had to now. You don't want to start over because what you had was great, right? But the ball game has changed. This is a new season of, it's like people that live in coastal areas where a hurricane comes in every other year and rips everything apart, right? They've become used to, okay, let's rebuild. And let's rebuild and let's rebuild. So it can be done. It's just maybe not in this specific individuals. It may not be what they want to have to go through, but it's what life is throwing their way. And so at some point you have to decide, am I going to take what life gives me and just complain about it and just kind of fall back and give up? Or are you going to turn around and say, okay, now let's do something? And you mentioned that's kind of the mindset. That's the type of personality I am. But that's a learned behavior. That's a learned way of thinking that I've gotten through life situations and through mentors and through positive people that have said, okay, get back up. That's right. Let's go,
Totally. And I I certainly agree with you on the fact that it's a learned behavior, right? It's a skill, in my personal opinion, and I think it's a superpower, right? The ability to get back up and keep moving, the ability to get up and look for an opportunity inside the problem, the ability to get up and say, okay, here's the reality of the situation, but I don't have to stay here, and I don't have to. I can accept these terms, but that doesn't mean that I settle, right?
Mhm.
That I settle for this particular set of circumstances. I can grow, I can get better, I can make the most of this. So that being said, with the challenges that have obviously been presented inside of public education, which if you've never been, for those people who aren't familiar with, you don't have a personal connection, you don't have a friend or a family member that is a public educator, then you don't really understand that grind. A lot of people don't understand how mentally and emotionally taxing that already is, right? How challenging it already is to work with other people's kids, right? They don't really understand that. And now to throw all of this on top of it, it's created a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. So in addition to that, you mentioned a few seconds ago that you've had some personal struggles as well. So talk a little bit about that, because on a recent podcast and a recent group of people, a client that I spoke with, we talked about how we're all going through this situation together. But in addition to that, we're all fighting our own battles, right? There's people going through stuff that we don't even know about. So I appreciate you being willing to your willingness to share a little bit of that today.
Well, let me first start, and if I get off track, kind of get me back going. But let me start with the school side of things, and then I'll flow into the personal.
Sure.
Because as a teacher, imagine having 30 people or 100 people or 200 people, depending on how big the school is, and you're telling them, you're creating ways for them to change, for them to do what they don't want to do, which is kind of like what we're talking about right now. Like life is forcing us to change and we don't want it. We're like, no, no, no. But that's what a teacher does daily. We're trying to instill that perseverance with them with new content or information, whatever it might be. And something that we see as valuable, we're trying to say, hey, this is valuable. And so that's, on any given year, that's not just pandemic. But now with the pandemic and being virtual and hybrid school and all this kind of craziness, right? Now the teacher's role, from my view, has been almost like doubled. Like what we see, like the amount of work that it takes to do hybrid learning, to talk to people and supervise people in class, as well as stay connected with people outside of class. It's been almost like double the work normally.
Sure.
And so, every teacher is facing and finding their own way, which is good and bad. If we had a streamlined way, we'd all fix it together. But since we're all going our own 50 million ways, that's kind of what's happening. And so we're all having to adjust with the way that everybody does things. So I get that, and I'm okay with that. But that's in a nutshell, kind of where teaching has gone this year and through all of this. It's become harder. We're connected, but we have to try and work harder to stay connected. Like we're connected digitally, but we're losing some face-to-face interactions with people in a lot of things that we used to have. We don't have that ease of access anymore, or the ability to just talk to students easily. And people will say, yeah, well, you can do this. But when you get 120 some people on a meet like this, it's chaos. You try that with a second grade class, see how it goes, right? But so that's school in a nutshell, and kind of like just my 2 cents about how, teachers, we're trying our best. We don't necessarily have controls. I know it's been in the news a lot about how teachers unions and things like that are swaying a lot of things. But as far as the district that I'm in, we're just trying our best. We want to reach the kids, meet the kids where we can. Deadlines are almost non-existent. If you're going to work next week on material from 2 weeks ago, I'll work with you. Let's go. If you're ready to go and grow, I'm ready to go with you. So I don't know how all teachers are doing, but that's how I'm choosing to do it. If you're ready in the moment, let's get you going. So take that as you will, and take that with life. I think with me personally, there's been seasons where I wasn't willing to grow. and I stunted my own growth, or I delayed the success that I could have had. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
so growth is a choice. How you grow through situations, you can accept it and move on and find a good path, or you can continue to just kind of fester in it, and it can be what it is, and it's not going to change until you change something.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's where I came up with the 3 Ps. And I don't know if has that been sent out in an email yet, or?
No, it is. It's processed for going into 2021 because it's going to be a great, I think it's a great I think it's great content and a great lesson to help people, help them step with a framework into the new year because of maybe the struggles that they've had this year. But let's talk about that. That was great. This popped up in a conversation that we had. I was actually getting ready to speak to a group of people, and you popped off this 3P idea about, assessing a situation, working through it, being proactive, right? Being positive, being proactive. And so let's break that down. Share with everyone that framework of the 3Ps and overcoming some obstacles and moving through some problems that you've had.
Okay, so step 1 is you have to identify the problematic pattern in your life. And so instead of just saying identify the problem, which is kind of what scientific method, right? What I'm saying is, and suggesting is, focusing on the pattern, because it's a repeat thing that keeps happening, whether you know it, you're doing it intentionally or not. And that is causing some stress or something negative to happen and occur. And you want that negativity out of your life. You want the changes to happen. And so you got to address the pattern as well as the problem. First comes the problem, but then you got to pay attention when it might creep back in. And I'll talk about that in maybe a personal story here in a second. Number 2, so first, identify the problematic pattern in your life. Number 2, create a proactive plan. Proactive versus reactive. Reactive, it just kind of comes your way, and laissez-faire, you just figure it out like a buoy on the ocean. It's just kind of going, a wave hits it, and it goes wherever the wave sends it. We don't want to be like that. We want to be proactive. So we want to recognize that a wave is coming and then kind of already decide which way we're going to go, let the wave kind of push us. And so there's a little bit of a plan to it. So create a proactive plan that leads you in the direction that you want to go. That's step 2. Step 3, practice the habits that will ultimately take you where you want to go. And it's more than just, and I think I saw this in one of your Instagrams or something to the gist of this. It's more about, like, we have the information. We know what we should do.
Yeah.
We got to do it though. That's
right.
Go do it, go do it, go do it. And we need to practice the act in a way, the positive plan in a way that it becomes a new habit and it replaces that problematic habit that was leading us to results we didn't want.
Yeah. And I love that application on the back end of that framework, because at the end of the day, we have to come to terms with the fact that we are creatures of habit. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a good habit, it's a bad habit. We are creatures of habit, and we cling to consistency, right? And so all that being said, whatever that problematic pattern is, and whatever that plan is that you create to move in a new direction, because the problem for a lot of people, I think, Andy, is the folks want a new destination, right? But you want to be somewhere different. But the hard work is understanding that you can't change your destination overnight, but you can change your direction, right? Mm-hmm. You can change your direction, but regardless of what direction you choose to go into, that preferred future, right? Whether it be financially, health-wise, spiritually, right? Occupation, relationally, with people in your home, whatever, then we have to develop consistencies, and we have to do those things over and over and over again, which in turn leads to the result. And you shared with me not long ago a personal situation that you faced, a problem in your life where you've had to make some adjustments, and you applied this to. You mind sharing that with folks today?
Sure. Real quick, just to kind of piggyback off what you're saying, one thing I would suggest to people at home, or viewers that are people, listeners, is to be specific. The more specific you can be with identifying the pattern, the things that are the triggers that are leading to it, the more specific you can be, the better. Because, and you mentioned degrees in things. And so I teach this in class sometimes, that a little small, like if you're talking about an angle, a geometry angle, a little small degree right here it could be flat, right? But you change just a couple degrees and now the outcome is much higher than it was.
Sure.
And you know, and just a few more degrees and you're even higher than you were. And so that's kind of, be specific, and that'll lead to the elevation basically. But yeah, in my personal life, I've used this, and it's crazy how it's just kind of like life wisdom. It's happened, and we can break it down and look at different areas of life and just the personal side that we probably all have and how it applies. So the one I think you're referring to, is that where we were talking about the jobs, the interviews? Okay, so give you a little short story, backstory. I was starting out. I had graduated college. I'd worked for my fraternity for a year, traveled around, faced a hard situation in my life, which actually I battled a little bit of depression, and it wreaked havoc on my life. And so I had to start over. I faced that point where I got to rebuild and go in a different direction. And so mental health, I understand the people that are going through that kind of stuff now. But once I found my ground again and started practicing the 3 Ps, and I decided, well, I've got a teaching degree. I want to go back into teaching. Let's transition to it. It wasn't as easy as I thought. I thought I could just go to one school, have an interview, get hired, and there I'm good. That wasn't the case. I ended up applying all over the state of Kentucky, and even looked into some other states to see, starting out, maybe I want to live somewhere else. But eventually I got accepted in some calls. I sent out my resumes everywhere, and I got 26 interviews in total. And again, that was a summertime. So we're talking about in the span of like 3 months, 26 interviews. Now you would think that one of those would have worked, right? Somebody would have said, yes, we want you, you're going to be our teacher. But 25 of those times were no's. And so,
man,
people that are going through rejection, or you've got an idea of what you think should happen. I've got the skills. You should hire me. I get that. Believe me, 25 times of no is kind of like you just want to give up. But I didn't. I decided, let's go back to kind of these 3 Ps. And maybe this was life just helping me learn these lessons. That way I could kind of share it one day later like this. But I focused on, what am I doing wrong? What's the problematic pattern, right? And so I was getting the interviews. It wasn't a resume issue. I'm getting all these callbacks. They want me to come in and meet people. Maybe it's a connection. Maybe I don't know the people and I need to introduce myself. It needs to be more personal. I need to try and develop a relationship. Or maybe in the interview, I'm not using the right language. I'm not using the language they use. I'm not putting the things, their needs and what they want, I'm not putting that on the table and saying I care about that too. And so, a combination of both of those is what I started to perfect and work on. And over time, I got a little bit better, a little bit more comfortable. I wasn't as nervous. Each interview I was researching a little bit more. And so, that's life just sharpening me and chiseling away, in the job field. You need to be a little sharper. You need to be a little sharper. You need to be a little bit more, until finally I was good to go, And so
I would say after about 21 of those, you were a professional interviewer.
Well, I've managed to teach it in school, a few classes, but
no one better to talk about that than yourself. And so as you identified that problematic pattern and created that proactive plan to move forward, and you practiced, you decided to see, listen, I can get better every time I step back in to this meeting, to this interview, to this space, right? And then eventually you landed that job. And what would you say you gathered from that experience?
I think just, over time, that the whole process is continual improvement, which in education now, that's one of those buzzwords phrases that we just always want to encourage continual improvement, continual
Yeah.
improvement. But I think I learned perseverance. I think I learned a little bit of grit. I think I definitely learned a little bit more about refinement and communication and relationships, because I was very much a let's just get it done. And if you
Yeah.
know me, let's get to what's the thing we're trying to do? Let's do it. Well, it's not the way we want it. All right, let's try it again. Let's go. But sometimes that's too savage. That's too much. That's too blunt. Right.
Yeah.
So I learned a little bit of refinement, and later in life, that's served me in a lot of different areas.
Yeah.
Just to be a little bit more gentle. I don't have to come in with a sledgehammer and say, let's rock this.
I mean, the patience, that you had to exercise throughout that process, and then also trusting the process, trusting that I'm showing up for the right reasons with the right motivation. I have something to contribute to this organization, and I'm not going to take personal, because you dealt with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
On top of the depression, I'm not going to take personal this rejection. It's not that I'm a bad person. It's not that I'm ill-equipped or that I'm not a good educator or that I'm not capable. It's that this wasn't the right opportunity for me, right? And this wasn't the right fit. And so I know, when people, when they hear no, when things don't go as planned, when the relationship doesn't work out, or they're struggling with their kids, or something on the job doesn't go their way, or they experience a lot of adversity, and kind of one of those things, like when it rains, it pours. It's hard for people to not internalize that, right?
Mm-hmm. One of the things that you mentioned just a second ago is like outlook, and just how we choose to perceive it. Not take it personal as a personal attack on us, but just reading it as it should be read, kind of unbiased. That's not that's not a learned thing, because we naturally, as humans, we've got emotions, we feel invested, we've put a lot of time and energy into it. We feel like we should be picked. And so I think that's something that you mentioned that I think needs to be kind of elevated just a hair, just so we're aware of it, that we need to be reading the situation from an emotional standpoint that's from some stability.
Yeah. Kind of detached, like detached from the outcome.
Pull yourself back a little bit.
Yeah. And I'm not going to let that dictate how I feel about what I'm trying to get accomplished. Right.
Because it's easy to get, what's the word I'm looking for? It's easy to get discouraged. It's easy to get angry and internalize things in a bitter way. It's easier to get bitter rather than to get better.
Yeah.
And so, that's something that we just need to be aware. And I think self-awareness is a huge thing that is maybe a little underrated, but is the difference maker in seasons like this. When you are self-aware and you know exactly what your triggers are, like case in point, Lily, my daughter, is 4 years old, and she'll do things that she'll push my buttons. Anybody got kids like that know your buttons and they push them like this? I'm gonna keep pushing. Don't push that button.
I'm dealing with that right meow.
So when they push my buttons, I've kind of got this underlying green Hulk inside of me, and the rage guy gets going, and so I have to, before I either lash out or before I just verbally just kind of blow up. What I've started to do and notice is that self-awareness is this is an area I need to work on. This is a problematic pattern that needs to be changed, that it's one part communication. I need to do a better job as the adult to communicate to my daughter. This is not going to fly. This is not the appropriate way to get attention, to work through things. This is not going to do it. The other thing is to communicate kind of to myself. You can't push that. You can't let her push that button and then just explode, be reactive. And so I've noticed here recently that I've actually, and I'm just going to pat myself on the back, because I've been doing a better job of being a proactive communicator, problem solver with my daughter specifically, because she now understands at 4. She's, kind of headsy. She gets it. She knows what she's doing when she's doing it. And so I just, there's a right way to handle it. There's a wrong way to handle it. And I don't want to be the Hulk,
Sure. Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Trying to find that balance of being tough and tender, communicating, the consistency of the expectations in the household, but doing it in a way that earns respect versus leading simply from a place of fear, right? Or of intimidation and instilling fear. And I think that's a tough balance to find for sure. And I appreciate you sharing that. Andy, as we work to close down, you mentioned on a recent call that, as we were talking about walking through this year, all the struggles, all the challenges that many people are facing, but also some internal battles that they're facing and maybe some things going on but behind the scenes. You've brought up multiple times, taking care of yourself, doing what's necessary to stay healthy, mind, body, and spirit. So what kind of recommendations would you make for people as we're closing this down? Because obviously for a lot of people, they've made some necessary adjustments and they're kind of back in a groove of being positive, being proactive on a daily basis. But for a lot of people, they're still trapped by fear. For a lot of people, they're still afraid of the unknown, right? I don't know what to expect. I don't know how things are going to pan out with the economy, or how when things are going to get back to some sense of normalcy inside my home, right? I'm discouraged because my child's at home and our finances have been challenged. Mentally, I'm not, there's all kinds of different scenarios we could play out here. What recommendations would you make for some of those people to try to stay healthy and on the up and up?
Okay, so speaking from ground level up, I would say, me personally, I would say for me, when I battled depression, I got to that point where I was on ground zero, rock bottom, and and it was God that got me out, not medicine, not necessarily, other things. It was a choice to follow Him, to put my life in His hands, as well as to have a little bit of faith, and to know that probably the things that I'm going to choose to do from here on out are going to be out of my hands, and I'm not going to have control over everything. I can try to design my whole life, but guess what? It's my design. And when somebody makes it their design, then my whole masterpiece is ruined.
That's
not
so
necessarily
good.
life. I've got a daughter that we try to paint together sometimes. Yeah, try to do that with a little one. Try to have your idea of what it's going to go, and then let them paint.
Yeah, well. Just did that literally a couple of days ago. But thank you for sharing that piece of letting go of control, right? And allowing your life to move in a new direction, because sometimes even though we're at an unhealthy place, we cling to it so much because we still know what to expect. And so when you made that decision to place your faith in something larger than yourself, to let go of control, how did things change for you?
Well, it's funny to think back when you think about your whole life, or you, the viewer, when you're thinking about your life and you're thinking about it in the mindset of like a timeline and little bullet points, things that maybe seemed really big at the time weren't. And then when you look back, and some things that you knew, wow, this is a big decision, it is a game changer. And that was one of those game changers for me, where I had to reboot, I had to reprogram, I had to think through. I had my life planned out, everything. It was looking great until it didn't happen, And so I've had to think through the 3 Ps, and as well as other things. But who do I want to be? And like I said earlier about being specific, I leave it open to be a little bit spontaneous, but the things that I want in life, I'm specific about, and I'm going to create some plans to go try and make that happen. Do they always happen? No, but do I want them to happen? Sure. Do I keep striving? Sure. When I reach a goal, do I set a new one? I try to, So mental health, you said, and physical health, I think they go hand in hand, right hand, left hand. If you're a person that you put a lot of stock in the mental, right now you're probably, by not being able to do what you've always been doing, you're probably limited, and it's frustrating. To that, I would say the answer might be the physical side. Maybe up the game with what you're doing physically. Try to do some different things to release some endorphins and all that kind of stuff, create some physical goals and see if the mental comes up, and vice versa. And so for me in 2020, in the spring, actually, I was telling Jeremy this a little bit, I don't know when, a little bit ago, but I faced some health issues, not COVID, but we didn't know what they were. It was something in my chest, and food wasn't digesting properly. So it was just kind of getting stuck in my chest, and I'd have that burning sensation, and it was a little more than heartburn. So I had to get on some medicine, but I realized this is one of those game changer moments where I need to change my life. I need to change my nutrition, my workout habits, and things like that. And we had been under COVID for about 2 or 3 months. And so I just started working out, and I started soft. I started easy, low weights, low reps, just push-ups, body weight stuff. And then I've built up to where now in the gym, I'm running 2 miles or so, and I'm lifting on top of that. And I'm not maxing out or doing anything super, super crazy, but I'm healthier than I was. And I can tell a big difference in my mental stability and my mental productivity and my ability to be self-aware and handle the situations that come because of the physical training that I'm doing. So I feel like it goes hand in hand. I think the other thing is back to that spiritual is what obstacles are blocking or interfering your relationship or your walk with God. Those things, that relationship right there affects everything else. Yeah. Or at least for me, it does. It's that bottom line base that I've created that kind of drives everything.
I appreciate you walking through that and being vulnerable enough to share some of those details of your story, your life, some of those ups, some of those downs, what you've learned in the process. I think that's where connection happens. I think that's where relationships grow, when you're able to get close enough to someone, sit down with someone and be able to share, hey, this is what's happened for me. This is my story. This is what I've experienced. And giving people an opportunity to learn from that, but also allowing yourself to learn from other people as well. So I appreciate you sharing that today. And we talked about some challenges in the profession of public education. We talked about some personal struggles you've had. We talked about that framework of the 3 Ps, and just to kind of close things down and land the plane today. I want to reiterate something that you shared for all of our listeners. I've heard Andy mention multiple times in this conversation, who do I want to be? I think so much comes down to that, continuing to ask ourselves that question, who do I want to become, right? And each day, taking those small steps to move in that direction, cultivating those healthy habits, right? To become the best version of yourself, but also understanding that you can't do that on your own. And Andy talked about the spiritual component there, his relationship with God, right? There's a component here as well, him being a husband, him being a father, him being in community with other believers inside the faith family, the people that he works with. And so I appreciate you sharing some of those details. But as we close down, bringing this thing back to education.
Okay.
Obviously, a lot of parents, a lot of grandparents, a lot of students, they're, limited on resources, or their home looks different, or walking through this virtual learning experience is different for different households. What could you offer, or what piece of encouragement would you share for parents and students right now walking through this, and in hopes that it could help them continue to stay in the game and just keep putting their best foot forward?
Loaded question. Right? To sum it all up, stay positive, try to make the most of every day, make each day your masterpiece, as John Wooden would say, and don't get too caught up with the deadlines and the stresses of how does this all work and this, that, and the other. Like, it's a process. And I think you mentioned that at the very start, that who you want to be and the person you decide, once you decide, it's going to take time. And so this is a storm we're all going through, and you're not alone. We're here with you. You may need to be, or your students may need to be more assertive than they have been in the past about their education. So I would encourage you, the listener, parents, students, to reach out to those people that are providing some instruction, and don't necessarily wait on somebody else to tell you what to do. Again, that goes back to, who do you want to be? Don't wait for everybody to tell you what to do and what to make this life. Decide it and start taking steps toward it.
And keep in mind, listeners, with that piece of advice that Andy just offered, we both realize that looks different at different stages of development for young people, right? When it comes to younger folks who aren't really able to grasp that concept, trust me when I tell you, we're not necessarily speaking to that audience in that regard. We're talking about young folks who already have a framework of what they're doing, why they're doing it. They're at an age where they realize that, listen, I am responsible for my attitudes and my actions, and the choices I make right here, right, are going to impact my future, whether I believe it or, whether I want to accept it or not. And so I appreciate you sharing those thoughts, Andy. And I know this conversation kind of went whoop, 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 whoop. But the thing is I wanted to make sure that we touched on a few of those things, because sometimes that's what it feels like when we're dealing with some of these obstacles, right? But then we talked about, let's bring it down. Let's bring it here. Let's identify the problematic pattern, right? Let's create a proactive plan. Let's try to be detailed and specific about that, right? Where do I want to go? Who do I want to become? And then let's practice those habits day in and day out. And one thing that I would encourage people to think about right now, whatever you're going through, wherever you're at, I would encourage you to focus on one habit. Not 5, not 6, not 12. I would encourage you, just think about one thing that you can do consistently, right, for the next several days, next several weeks, this month to close down the year, that can get you moving in a positive direction. Andy, do you have anything before we close down, brother?
No, man, it's been good. Thank you for having me on this. And to the viewers, guys, if you ever need me, look me up, reach out to Jeremy, and we can get in contact.
Yes, and if you haven't listened to the episode that we did a little over a year ago, actually kind of at the beginning, the launch pad of this podcast, we talked about why personal development. So shameless plug right there. Go back and listen to that episode as well, because we talk about why personal growth and development, right? Why developing your mindset, why learning new ideas and being a lifelong learner, why that's important. It is a great episode. Go listen to it. Sadly, there's not a Zoom where you can see our beautiful faces, right? It's just an audio. But all that being said, thank you, Andy, for blessing our listeners. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you more than I could ever tell you, my friend. And folks, remember this, right? It's always a great day to make it a great day. And don't just go through life, grow through life. And everybody, I don't care who you are, where you come from, what your name is, how much money you make, where you work at, where you live at, everybody can encourage somebody. Stay fresh, stay blessed, and we will see you guys on the next episode. Andy, thanks again, brother.
Peace, guys. Have a good one.